Welcome to the Crush Cravings with Confidence podcast. I'm Coach Lisa Callahan, a recovered emotional eater. I ended decades of self-inflicted struggles with food through taking a journey of self-discovery, which revealed the secrets of what was going on underneath the food. Throughout this podcast, we'll explore topics that are rarely talked about, like low self-esteem, lack of confidence, people-pleasing, and decades of self-sabotaging behaviors. Rather than just focusing on the food, we'll dive deeper into aspects of who you are as a person and how you ended up relying on food for comfort to begin with. My mission is simple: to empower women to regain their confidence and prioritize self-love, regardless of the number on the scale. Discover what you've really been craving, and trust me, it's not about the food. This podcast is based on insights shared from the Women's Emotional Eating Community Support Group on Facebook, so be sure to check out the show notes for the link to the group and a complimentary gift just for you. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hey, welcome to another fun and insightful episode of the Crush Cravings with Confidence podcast. The topic today is, once I stopped being afraid of food, these 7 things changed. And we have a special guest here today. Her name is Christine. She lives in the UK. She'll introduce herself, but she is a recovered emotional eater, and she is also a cancer survivor. So we're really excited to welcome you onto the podcast today, Christine. Welcome to Fresh Cravings with Confidence. Are you excited to be here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. So my name is Christine Davis. I live in quiet Somerset, and I found Lisa about 2 years ago. And it's been a great journey that we've had, haven't we?
We really have. Yeah, it's been very uplifting to just watch your growth and where you started and where you're at now. In between all of the things that we're going to talk about today, real life experiences. So just take us back for a minute. What were some of the challenges that you were experiencing before you started on a journey of self-discovery with us? But just that journey of self-discovery being the real thought there that you turned inward for some of your answers.
Yeah, I think I was on the journey of self-discovery for about like 5 years before I met Lisa. And I think I was sort of clearing away all the little cobwebby things like sleep and pain and all that. And then when I finally came to Lisa, it was the fixation was food at that point, because it was to do with an autoimmune diagnosis, and I was getting into a quite a rigid mindset as to how to heal the autoimmunity, and also coupled with like sort of body image issues underneath all of it. And so I have obviously tried some diets, couldn't stick to it. And when I found Lisa on Facebook, the way she sold it was that there wasn't going to be a diet, and there was going to be peace and freedom, which was what I actually wanted, because I think deep inside that's what I've always wanted all my life, but I think I just didn't quite know how to get there. So yeah, that was, I'd say, where I started.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because a lot of women who come to work with us do have diagnoses of things. Autoimmune is such a broad, spectrum. I mean, there's so many different types of ailments, different autoimmune, experiences, and then we can sometimes get so fixated on what we feel like the problem is that we just want to fix that, and then we forget about the peace part, and that if you had the peace part, some of the symptoms would actually dissipate. Like, I had struggled for my whole entire life since I'm a little 2-year-old with gastric, like GI issues. And I continued to think that I couldn't eat this and I couldn't eat that, and everything was triggering to my body and my system was like this. And I kept telling myself all of those things. And then for this part of my life now, since I've taken this journey of self-discovery, like, I don't have any of those symptoms anymore at all. Like, none of them. So it's very interesting.
Amazing.
It really is. So when you say that you try to kind of fix the problems over the years, what types of things did you do as you were working on
Um,
fixing?
yeah, I think most of the I was diagnosed with autoimmunity lupus back when I was like 25. So everything was kind of controlled by drugs until I had my kids. And then it all kicked off. And then it became worse when I had my second. And I think that's when things started crumbling. So that's when I started looking for help for sleep. And then I started looking for help for my chronic pain, like the lupus, like muscle ache, fatigue things. Um, and then I did like some kind of like autoimmune protocol stuff, but couldn't quite keep up with it. And there's a lot of like beating myself up that, like you want to heal, and yet why are you not keeping to it?
What could you share? Like, what were some of those rigid protocols that you
So yeah,
you were
I
taught
tried.
that like if you didn't do this, then you wouldn't be out of pain, right? Because it's like you're being told it's like you have to do this, this, and this. And then when you can't keep up with it, that enters into this shame space and it doesn't allow you the freedom to like navigate through your own journey, like what's best for you. So what were some of those protocols like?
Um, so I wouldn't want to like name the protocols outright because it might not be the way that I have done it. So I don't want to discredit anybody out there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think a lot of it perhaps was also my all or nothing mindset. Like I think I had a lot of like perfectionism attached to it. Like I wasn't compassionate at all in my search for healing. I was all like, I will do this and I will get healed. So much so I remember after my second child, I told my consultants, I was like, I will get off the drugs. And like I did it with sheer force. And of course, I suppose I did it, it came through physically. But I think mentally, spiritually, I wasn't at peace enough to sustain it, perhaps. So I would say, like working with you, Lisa, I can see like that's my superpower, like my persistence and my strength to see things through, but at the same time to see it that it is to my detriment if I do not like temper it down. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where some of those ideas that maybe you did get from different protocols, like went to the extreme, so then it became that all or nothing, which ended up not being helpful so much with anything, diet, exercise, food rules, doing it this way or that way. It has to be this way. And that I think was where you were really getting stuck. Is
Yeah.
that fair to say?
Definitely. Yeah, totally. I think it was the whole I'm doing it well for a week and then I'll just self-sabotage. And I suppose before working with you, I just didn't understand why. Like there were days when I'd be like, my body isn't telling me what it doesn't want to eat, and that was whereas some people on the protocols had very clear symptoms, whereas I
Yeah.
never had any clear reaction to food, but it was more of like this, you should do this to get healed kind of thing. And I just wasn't in tune with my body, I think, or even what I wanted. I think maybe it wasn't more that.
Sounds like it was bringing on a lot of fear.
Yes, totally. Yes. It was so fear-based, right? Like it wasn't like out of love, I think.
Yeah. And it's a lot of what we talk about when it comes to like even diets, like I don't want to knock any diet. Like I think all diets work. They do for weight loss. And yet at the same time, if you never get to the root of that problem to begin with, it just brings about this fear of doing things right or wrong. And it's just not sustainable. And so we
No,
attach like different things, right?
yeah. And I think what recently, so like when you coach me and our community, we do a lot of the five whys, and I've been really fascinated with it. So I was having one of those moments 2 days ago, and so I did the five whys on my own, more than five whys. I think it was like 25 whys. Um, but I got to the point where I was like, oh wow, like I'm choosing, whatever. The point was that I think I was eating when I wasn't hungry, so I was kind of like questioning why I was doing it, and I came up with this thing like just spontaneously, like I realized I lost the weight at some point, and then but I gained the fear, like I lost weight and suddenly I want to hold on to the lost weight. And that
Mhm.
created such a magnificent fear in me that wasn't released until I had to stop exercising because of surgery. And then I saw that actually my body was fully capable and able to maintain homeostasis. But I was so stuck in that fear zone that I just thought I had to like physically manufacture all these things all the time, like at this like non-stop hamster wheel. I think that was what I realized 2 days ago. So yeah,
Yeah.
weight loss, fear gain, like what was the point of it all?
Yeah. And it's so cool because throughout the time that we've worked with you, I mean, you know, like all of those things that we were sharing, like family, kids, work, autoimmune. You have had a cancer diagnosis not that long ago. You've had to have surgery. You've had some real changes to your physical chemistry as a woman. And so all of these things that they could be stacked one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other. This happened, and then that happened, and then this happened. And that's where you can really like just get like filled up with this feeling of I'll be happy when. And all of that
Mm.
fear just can really escalate and it almost feels like it buries you. Now, as you've been through this process, and I know as we've worked together, we've had all of these things that I'm sharing have come into thing. At first, it was maybe the kids, right? Your children are young.
Yep, they're 5 and 9. So my kids were a big, I thought they were one of my big problems as well. But I think they were just a thing, like what we call in our community. Because I had underlying other limiting beliefs really that were driving my reaction to them. And I think what I realized recently was that literally, I think a lot of, again, it was fear in my parenting, right? Like fear of not getting it right, fear of repeating generational trauma, fear of, um, yeah, just perfectionist kind of fears, I think.
Yeah. And that
And
was one of the things we had
yeah,
to start to move through. And that's why it's so cool that you have these tools now, really, for your own decision making process for how you're experiencing daily life. And so that's why it's such an amazing, like purpose driven, like choice that you made the other day to think to yourself, wait, what am I feeling? What am I feeling? And you were able to pause instead of just, feeling helpless and feeling like this is never going to end. What am I going to do? Like you were able to redirect yourself. So that way you didn't feel like you were falling off the edge of that cliff into failure land or I can't do this or frustration, a
mm,
fear. None of that happened. You were able to recognize with awareness, hey, something is feeling interesting to me. I'm going to get curious about it. The exercise Christine was talking about is to just write down what you're feeling and then write the word why underneath it. And then write down the word why again. And then write down the word why again. And you keep asking yourself why. Christine shared it as the 5 whys. But she wanted to take it further and she figured it out. She like landed somewhere where suddenly she was like, oh, that's where my safety is. That's where my intuition is. I don't have to look for my answers outside there because they're here. And I do remember when we first started working together, Christine, that there was some wording that we wanted to change. It was the parenting or my, how am I as a wife or as a daughter or there was a lot of labeling. Do you want to talk a
yes.
little bit about that?
Yes, I actually, so preparing for this, I revisited some of my journals and I did remember you gave me a labeling diet, a diet of
I did.
labeling,
I said
right?
a
Or something like
cleanse.
that. A
I said we
diet
have to do
cleanse,
a
that's it,
labeling.
labeling cleanse. Yes, that's the
It was a
word.
labeling cleanse. I said
Um,
you're not allowed to label.
not
Yeah.
allowed to label. And I just remembered that void it created because I guess I'm quite analytical by nature. And so I like things in like their perfect little boxes just for my brain to work better. And that week, I just remembered struggling because I would like, like I'm trying to talk to myself with self-compassion and all that kind of things. Except then I'd be like, I can't call myself a good mom, like, because like
Mm.
I'm not just a mom, right? Like I'm a mom, but I'm not just a mom, and like mom isn't my entire identity. Neither is skinny or fat or whatever all those labels we give ourselves. So yeah, I just remember being really uncomfortable about it. And I remember being very resistant in coaching earlier on. Like I'd come off these calls and I'd like tell my husband like, "Oh my God, she's so exasperating. Like she's not hearing me," and and like just revisiting the coaching calls later on. That was just quite funny. Like um, how resistant, and yet now like I totally understand the whole like you like you have a breakdown before you have a breakthrough, right? And so
Yeah.
like you can see it so like, I can see it so clearly now, like the resistance and the struggle right to that point, and then suddenly like it just breaks open, like yeah.
Yeah. It's the wording, the only way out is through. And it is your persistence that allowed you to push through that resistance. And that's the cool part, is because just on the other side of the resistance lives your peace. It was right there all along. You had to push through that. And so that's such a cool thing about like looking at it as a whole. And that's why we titled this episode, like, after I stopped being afraid of food, these 7 things changed. And really, some of those things were the labeling, the perfectionism, the blaming, maybe the pain or the uncomfortableness that you were feeling, um, calling yourself this all or nothing, having the perfectionism, having the fear, all of these things, like fear of like passed down generational trauma, like things that, these are personal to you, right?
Yep, definitely. There's a lot of
And I
dismantling in the last 2 years.
dismantling, and we use that word a lot in reference to actually drama, dismantling drama, to
Yeah.
like de-escalate like that heightened state of kids and work and husband and family and, health and time and organization and money. Like they're all things, right?
Yep.
And that's what we're that's what we're navigating through. I know that I didn't realize that I had really any of that, like any of it. Through taking a journey of self-discovery, I started to recognize new things about myself. And it was only after I started to recognize new things about myself that I was able to apply it to the first thing that I applied it to, which was food. And then I was able to apply it towards relationships and organization and money and perfection and fear, and just really continued to expand my mindset all more and more, which is really what you required, to
Mm.
be able to get to that piece. Um, I know that you just shared that you felt resistant, and so I was wondering, was there anything else you found difficult about the way that self-discovery works? It will work for everybody. Self-discovery will work for everybody, and it's just a matter of meeting yourself right where you're at. And I know that from where you're at, Christine, versus, and we don't compare. Comparison is the thief of happiness. Yet at the same time, you are in a different season of your life than some of our other members. We do have some members who have little children, and we have a lot of other members who are retired and don't have the daily life, like real season that you're in. So I love that, like, we're able to coach each person individually. So what were some of your difficulties through the
I
journey?
think one of it is the going through the messy middle to find like that you can trust yourself, right? I think I remembered struggling for almost a month with like I know one of the things you told us to do was I remember this massive coaching session where you were like, why do you have to control the food? And I was like, well, because if I don't control it, it'll get out of control. And, it was just going in a massive circle of fear. Um, and then you sort of gave me the job of just like eating it. Like if I wanted to eat it, eat it. And obviously that's so alien after like 4 or 5 years of doing protocols that I can't just eat that thing without like thinking of its consequences and da 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 da. Um, And so I remember just being really uncomfortable with it for a month, just but like kind of pushing myself through it. And some days I would like totally suck at it. And some days I would be all right, right? So I think if anything, self-discovery is probably just being okay with the discomfort, right? Um, like it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable getting to know. No, it's not uncomfortable getting to know yourself. I think it's uncomfortable peeling back the layers that you have covered yourself with all these years.
Yeah.
Um, and when you don't have that safety blanket, so to speak, it's scary for a while, right? But
Yeah.
it's kind of knowing, if anything, I would say you have to pick the people you work with so that you know you have the support um, when you feel really overwhelmed or helpless, which I think most people who might be listening are feeling right now. Like you're feeling helpless, powerless. I remember I went through the journals to prepare, and I remember all those words so clearly. Like I feel helpless, I feel powerless. When will this end? And that kind of narrative, which can be so incapacitating, I think, right, for a lot of us in that season. But there is a way out.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I think what ends up happening is that it's like we do have like things that happen, trauma, like you said, even generationally speaking, things that you culturally, have everybody's has their own story. And I think that sometimes what happens is that you just get like comfortable in the uncomfortable. So it's like there's a time where that's sort of building. And then, like you said, you're like in a regular life, you're having kids, you're doing these things, and now suddenly it's a different space for you. And so then it's like almost like we have like, I don't know if you want to think about it as like just scabs that are just
Mm,
covering all of these like wounds, and you're uncomfortable with them, and yet you're not yet like getting them completely off so that they can heal. So it's almost like
mm,
you're willing to keep that uncomfortable itchy scab on, but you know how you have to go through that part where it really you've got to like leave that thing alone, because if you keep picking at it, it's going to keep getting infected. And you've got to take that is the messy middle, and that is Brene Brown calls it that. And I love also that you said that a breakthrough always comes on the heels of a breakdown, which is also Brene Brown. We've taken a lot of different, like concepts and really been able to put them into a space where you can take it and you can identify then, like, what are you feeling? And it's not about the food. Could you explain that a little bit, or from your experience? Because you had so many of those protocols that to be able to break up, like literally break up with that version of yourself who was like, it is about the food. What do you mean? Like, you did have to push yourself through that. You have any words on that?
yeah, definitely. I think when we say that it's not about the food here, obviously there are certain things that we ought to know about, like, food generally, that is just good knowledge. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I think it's when you almost give over your power to someone else who isn't in your body, who isn't in your mind, who doesn't live in your space, um, for them to dictate to you what is good for you, right? Without the flexibility that we ought to give ourselves if we were pursuing compassionate healing rather than like a perfectionistic healing. Um, so I think like for me, I would be like, right. And I think because again, I guess people selling protocols as well, if you want to guarantee outcome to your clients, you are going to try to get them to adhere to your protocol as closely as possible. So I totally get that point. But I think for me, I took it to be an all or nothing. Um, and so I really had to start listening to my body, like, oh, do I really react to potatoes? Do
Mhm.
I really react to, I don't know what, there were other crazy things that were said that we shouldn't eat. They were all falling out of my head, but I remember there were a lot of
It's
different things
okay. I'm
that
glad
like,
that
you know,
they've fallen out of your head. That just see that just there is like a good amount of proof right now is that Christine can't even remember all of the protocols that she spent decades of her life following. That
yeah, no,
that's
that's
very
right.
organic and amazing.
So yeah, so like it was just so fear orientated and nothing intuitive about it. I think that's probably what it was. Whereas now I would like eat something and if it didn't feel right, then I'll go, all right, why? And if I was really that bothered, then I'd investigate or I'd just try it again and see what happens again. And it wasn't the whole rigidity and like such a fear-based approach towards anything, in life really.
In life, which how has that impacted your relationships with spouse, with children, with family, with work, with motivation for yourself and your life and your trajectory that you want to take your life in? Like when you're focused on pain and fear and all or nothing and perfectionism and blame and labeling and living inside of that tiny little space where all of the fear just exacerbates and it comes more and more, and then it does affect your body physically, like it does. And now that you have that freedom, like the trajectory is actually changing for you, like you're expanding and exploring. So how has self-discovery not just crushed your food thing, but how has it helped you in your life, period, like in
Yeah,
all?
there's so many areas, I'd say, like my with my kids, like, I used to, I mean, I realized recently that I used to control them so much because I was basically trying to repress their emotions because I was also repressing my emotions. So it felt uncomfortable to have their emotion when I didn't even allow my emotions to come out, right? So there's a season of like really just learning to feel pain, sadness, sorry, like fear, sadness, that kind of stuff. And then with my spouse, with my husband, I think it's more just realizing that I had to listen to myself first before I can, um, or rather than before, my job is to listen to myself first and foremost. And if I can't hear myself, I can't blame others for not hearing me.
Mm. Oh, I love that.
Right? Like, because
Wow, listen to that. If I can't hear myself, I cannot blame others for not hearing me.
yeah,
Wow.
because I would come out incoherent and like I think a marked difference from who I was before was how much self-doubt there was, right? So I'd like, be so murky in so many areas, like murky boundaries, murky decisions, back and forth here and there. Whereas now, like, the other thing we learn here is what's that? Set boundaries that are clear and kind, right? And that
Yeah,
your
yeah.
boundaries
It-
are fluid as well, right?
yeah, because if you when whenever you're like out of your integrity as far as your boundaries go, you can never have compassion at the end of it. So then you just get frustrated and then you're angry and then nobody hears you and then you're crying and then somebody's mad, you're mad for 2 days, you don't get to talk to that person. And then so that ends up being unkind because now you're feeling like you're perhaps like have been a victim in that space, and then a victim always becomes a bully, so then there's no compassion, and we end up feeling resentful, and resentment always comes from a lack of boundaries. So you don't have that time and space to just pause, see your part, and recognize that maybe the reason why the person can't hear you, or the reason why they're, I don't know, asking you to do something that you didn't want to do, is because you're not clear. So
Yes,
that's
yeah,
so
definitely.
helpful in
Like,
relationships.
yes. Yeah, so I covered children, parenting, marriage. And I think the
And
other thing really is, um, I think when you are so stuck in your victim space of pain, food, weight, whatever it is you're struggling with, um, you begin to not have joy in your life, right? And probably for a lot of people listening as well, it's you're probably in that space where you're like, I haven't had joy in a while.
yeah, like
And
nothing
so
makes me happy.
that's it. Because if you're also living in the I'll be happy when stacked with the, the drama in your head all the time, taking up like, like real estate in your mind, you're not
Taking
gonna
space.
have space to find joy. So I think for me, it's also rediscovering joy, and that, and from there, it kind of stems into like money is just like a form of energy, time can be made in a way, right? Like if you have the
Right.
right mindset to approach time,
Yeah.
without the all or
It's,
nothing.
and it's also, though, time is actually a non-renewable resource. So it's like if you give it away just haphazardly, you will have to like start, like meet yourself where you're at. It's like you can't go back and change the time, right? So
Yes,
sometimes
yeah,
people spend a lot of years wasting their current time, living in a deficit of time because they're living in the past. And that, I think, even from some of the experiences that we went through as we coached you, that there were some memories that were like kind of like taken, like you said, real estate in your mind that maybe happened when you were 7, like different
yeah.
experiences. They're still your memories. It's like sometimes we think, well, if I just stop thinking about my past, then like who will I be? They're still yours. It's just that they're not like consuming your time. You don't have to live here and today and then have to keep kind of taking the elevator down to a time with, a long time ago, and then try and bring up that old information and then apply it to a current circumstance. That doesn't work.
No, and that's what keeps you stuck, right? Because like what you described it
Yes.
as would be like we're then just like the whole inner child work where like you are literally like your 6 year old is meeting your 6 year old kind of thing, right? In those horrible
Yeah.
parenting moments, where your
Yeah.
uncaged 6 year old is out fighting with your 6 year old and you're like, what has happened? I'm the adult here. Um, but then at the same time, like I remember struggling a lot with that kind of reframing the limiting belief that you taught us. Because again, like it felt dishonorable to my memory or whatever. But then actually when you really looked at it, was probably you who coined it, but in a way where you said like, we're all unreliable narrators of each other's stories, right?
Yeah.
So my 9 year old or my 6 year old interpreting the story at that point as a 6 year old without the help of an adult to sort of balance it out. Um, and then she takes it and holds it as a gold piece for the rest of her life. And that's what's kind of keeping us stuck, right? Whereas if now as the adult, we can come alongside our inner child and go, hey, look, there's perspective here now. So
Yeah.
when your 6 year old comes out with your 6 year old, it doesn't turn into a huge fight, right?
Yeah. Because I remember during some of the coaching sessions, like, we were explaining, and you wanted to explain certain things, and you're like, and he said, but I'm like, and how old do you feel when that's happening? And you're like, probably 6. And I'm like, and how old is your son? And you're like, he's 6. I'm like, I know, he's 6. And then that was what I think snapped you. And you were like, oh, wait a minute. He actually is 6. He's not just acting from that space. So it's kind of
Yes.
cool. We actually, in Crush That Food thing, we call that part of the learning process. We call that maturing frozen emotions. So it's pretty cool. It's really fun. All right, we are wrapping up here. What I want to do is just ask you one more question. Um, is there anything that you would give as advice, like to somebody who is wanting to start on self-discovery and yet who is scared to move through this? Because of some of the messy middle parts that, I used to say, I don't want to open up that can of worms. I remember saying that a lot before I kind of knew that there was stuff that it would be important for me to work out through my life. I had done therapy, and when I went to a new therapist, I would kind of go like this. I'd kind of go, here's my life. Here you go. Could you just fix me? And then let me know when it's done. Like I just I was like, I'll be back. I'll be back in a year, maybe. Can you just let me know when I'm done,
Just gonna check out for the moment. I'll see you soon.
Yeah. So I really didn't, when I first started self-discovery, I was introduced to it by somebody who was like, there's a class that's coming and it's going to be on this weekend, and I think it would be really good for you. And I'm like, what? Like, what's the class? And they couldn't even explain to me what it was. They're like, I don't know how to explain it, but I just think it would be good for you. And it was like a very pivotal moment where they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I really felt like that was that moment that a teacher appeared, and I didn't even know where it was going to take me. There was something in me that drove me towards that place. And that was like, I think 15 years ago now, maybe somewhere around there. And I'm so thankful that like I was driven in that direction. So if you had advice for somebody who had my thoughts of like, I don't want to open up any can of worms, but then is also making a choice. Like, I didn't think about this before. If you don't want to open up a can of worms, and that means that you're willing to keep a can of worms inside of you.
Mm,
And I don't
yeah.
want worms crawling inside of me. I don't know about you, but I never thought about it like that. I just thought, I don't want to let all these worms out. But then that sounds icky too, to keep worms inside. So,
Mm.
any advice?
So I guess my advice would be look for the people, the coaches and the support that are willing to help you with the to get the worms out, like compassionately, I would say. Um, because there are a lot of people out there helping each other these days. Um, and I just think you only have one shot in life. Um, and if you don't, and if you keep holding on to the worms, they just start to poison every part of your life, right? And you don't get the joy. I mean, if I just end with this bit, I was just reflecting on, I was talking to my husband preparing for the podcast, and I was just reflecting on how, while navigating cancer in this in this community, how I have, because I felt the feelings, I processed it, I was very real about where I was at every step. Um, I honestly do not feel traumatized at all by double surgeries, crazy different news up and down and all that kind of stuff. Like the memories I have of it are so unfragmented, like they're just very matter of fact, and it just feels so whole. Like it's just a part of me, but it doesn't weigh me down, if you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, in
The way
comparison
that,
to say, yeah, like because I was just reflecting on like my birth story with my first, and that was traumatic, and I still have work to do there, but it just feels so heavy every time I step into that picture. But when I stepped into like the surgeries, I don't feel the heaviness. I don't feel the stacking, the weight of it all.
and it was interesting because the type of cancer that you had, and you can share if you'd like, because I know maybe you wanted to read something. Was that something that you'd like to still do?
Oh, I
If
totally
not, that's
forgot
okay.
about that.
It's okay. Okay, no problem. But the type of cancer that you had was in your. Do you want to share?
Yeah, I can just, it was womb cancer, and it was really I don't think it was shocking. It was just a bit of a delay in how it came together, finding it. But when I came to it, you know, like I struggled with it, wondering why and all that kind of stuff. And I shared a lot in the community. I looked for support, but I was just very honest. And I think that was the difference between, say, my cancer diagnosis and being pregnant and going through childbirth, where
So
I
when you
felt like,
say womb, is that like uterine? Like uterine? Is that
so
uh,
it was, they call it endometrial and ovarian. So I had,
okay?
so it was just endometrial at first, and then that was what I meant by like the stack. It wasn't stack, but it was like I got it as endometrial. We could
And
keep
you
the
had to have a
ovaries.
full
Then the
hysterectomy.
next like 2 weeks, it was like, now you got to get the ovaries out, but they're
Mhm.
fine. But you got to trust the process. And you're like, what? And then you go, all right, I'll trust the process, get the ovaries out. And then lo and behold, the ovary one had cancer as well. So, you know, it was all just very organic, and I felt very safe in a way in how
Isn't that
decisions were made,
amazing?
even
And
though it was, yeah.
how do you think that had that happened, because this happened recently, had that happened before you had taken this journey of self-discovery, when your autoimmune was flaring up, when you were struggling, and these are our things that we were kind of talking about um, that have changed really, is perfectionism, all or nothing, fear, blame, guilt, shame, closed-minded, like repressing emotions. Like, if this had happened when you were in that space, what would be one thing that would be different? Like, what would that have
If I
looked like?
hadn't gone through self-discovery,
Hmm.
I think it would just make my fear bubble even bigger. Like, you know, I was already living in so much like fear bubble about food and movement out of autoimmunity.
In your
That if
body.
you added cancer onto the list, can you imagine? I'd like not be able to eat anything, or throw out all the microwaves in the house, and you know, all the things that one could possibly do to have a safe life. But then that wasn't the way to live, right? Like, if
Yeah.
anything, there was more to life than safety. But I know our core thing is safety. So it's holding it compassionately and seeing how you can lead the need for safety into a rational space, right? I think that's probably where it is.
You navigated through it with maturity and love and kindness and compassion for yourself. And it was honestly a beautiful experience to share with you. So, and this podcast has been a beautiful experience to share with you as well. So, thank you so much for being here, Christine. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye for now. All right, ladies, if or whoever is listening to this podcast, we have a women's group, so I'm used to saying ladies. If you want to find out more about what we do, if you want to learn more about Crush That Food Thing self-discovery system, or any of our online courses, we have one called the Mindset Makeover. Or even if you just want to join the free women's emotional eating community support group, there will be links in the show notes. And as always, I love seeing your comments. I love when you share the episodes. I love when you like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can always just reach out to me on social media, Coach Lisa Callahan. And then if you want to email me, lisa@coachlisacallahan.com. All right. We will see you next time. This wraps up another episode of Crush Cravings with Confidence. All right. Bye for now. All right, my beautiful friend. That brings us to the end of another episode from the Crush Cravings with Confidence podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening today and took something from our conversation that you are going to put into immediate action. I love spending time with you and would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with at least one friend today who you think might be struggling too. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any other amazing topics. And please, please do leave me a review. It would mean the world to me. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.